record on this.
Yeah, I'll just speak for a few minutes, a little bit about what Alan said, don't make sure it's not a pitch. In a nice way, he said that he doesn't want obviously pitching for charities, but I mean, I think Jason and Mary will agree that it's very difficult when you work for a charity not to pitch in some way, because I think when you work for a charity, it's sort of, I suppose, like any business really, but this for a charity, you to really get involved, you need to be very passionate about it, and it needs to sort of form part of your DNA. So I live and breathe what we do at the moment at a place like Sobell House. But I'll just talk just for a few minutes about what we have been doing over the last few sort of fairly challenging months as a charity. But I thought I'd just sort of mention two quotes that I talk a lot about, and in a way that makes me do what I want to do. Really, there's a great quote from a lady called Cicely Saunders, who was probably like the founder of the modern day hospice movement. So Sobell House is an adult hospice, for those who don't know, but I think most people now will probably know that we're an adult hospice in Headington. But she said in the late 1960s, when she was looking at starting St. Christopher's in London, she quoted, "You matter because you are you, and you matter until the end of your life." And that sort of statement is in the DNA of places like Sobell House. Everybody matters, and everybody matters right until the end. So that's basically what we do. And then, what I do at the hospice, my job is to connect with the business community. So we have lots of different partnerships with the business community. And there's a great quote here: "We make a living out of what we get and a life out of what we give." So my job really is to go around talking about Sobell House, talking at ways that people can give, and the people give in lots of ways. People give their money, people give their time, people give their advice, people give their enthusiasm, people give in lots of different ways. So that is what I do, and it's a great joy to work for charity and to see people giving, because I'm pretty sure that when people give, they often end up getting more out of it than the people they're giving to, really, or certainly get as much out of it. So it's a great joy to see that. And just very quickly about Sobell House, we have community nurses. We have we have nurses in the hospital at John Radcliffe. We've got the actual hospice, 18 beds in the hospice. We've also got a day centre. And any one day, we're caring for around about 500 people in those sort of 4 settings. And we're in an NHS hospice, so Sobell House is NHS. I work for the charity part, where we need to raise around about £2 million to support what we do at the hospice. So that's basically what Sobell House is, and in a way, what I do. Now, what we have been doing over the last few months is trying to rethink what we do, because basically a lot of what we do as a fundraising organisation is getting people together. People gather together to do things, and because of those things have actually stopped, people can't gather in mass participation. So we've been really thinking, what are we doing? So what we first started doing, and there's a lot of connection to business here. We made sure that we were thanking people. Now, as a charity, the thanking part is often the most sort of important part. Often people remember thank you rather than the reason why if it's a good thank you, they remember the thank you rather than the reason they gave something in the first place, really. And the thank you often is a link to the next, it's to the next opportunity that they may want to give something to us. So we've been doing a lot of thanking over the last 2 to 3 months. It probably sounds a bit trite, but we do that in lots of ways. We do it on the phone, we do it via social media, we write to people. And that's just a massive part of what we do at the moment, trying to thank people. We've also got volunteers that come in every week over in normal times. So what we've been doing with them, we've been ringing them to check up that they're okay. So we found that just spending a little bit of time focusing on the people who support us, either through financially, through their time, in lots of other ways, we've been doing that. And it's been a real joy to chat to people, because when you speak to a volunteer who's been used to coming in for the last 10 years on a Tuesday morning to open the post or whatever, they're really missing it. And I think it shows me that volunteers do volunteering for lots of different reasons, and a lot of it is to do with community and friendship. So that's what we're doing on the thank you part. But the big area that we have had to look at is the way that we communicate with our supporters, and the way that we ask supporters to perhaps do something for us. And obviously, like every organisation, charity or non-charity, we've had to go more digital over the last few months. So things like the London Marathon was cancelled. It's probably likely the Oxford Half Marathon was cancelled. So last year, the Oxford Half Marathon raised around about 90,000 for Sobell House. That, you know, it hasn't been decided yet, but I can't see sort of 15,000 people running around Oxford in a few months' time. So we've been looking at ways that we can encourage our sports to do other things. So it's all been digital, really. We've got online, virtual challenges. We got involved with the 2.6 challenge, and that was by the London Marathon. We also introduced our Stay Home Challenge. I've introduced what we call the Land's End to John O'Groats virtual challenge. So we've had a really great bunch of people last week who raised 3,000, who travelled 874 miles on their bikes and running and walking for Sobell House. That's a really great thing to do. And again, I think they got more out of it than as much as got out of it as they actually put into it. So we've also got the Sobell House quiz. And I'm also looking at having a virtual business club event like the one we've done now. I have found through Alan's great networking here and other things I've been involved with, I think using this sort of forum, I've made more connections over the last 3 months than I probably have in the last couple of years, really. And I mean, you can't beat obviously chatting to someone on a one-to-one, but in a way, on a virtual, doing these sort of things, it is a bit like chatting to people on a one-to-one in a group, I found, really. And I've made loads of connections. I mean, lots and lots over the last 3 months. So a bit of a shout out to Alan for getting this together, and everybody else. Thumbs up to Alan and lots of other people who've done things like this. One thing we have learned as well, we like all charities, we had an emergency appeal. We were planning on doing an appeal anyway. At Sobell, we've never really done that sort of thing. We've never really, we communicate with our supporters, but we don't often ask them directly for money. We send a newsletter out 3 times a year and we show how people can give, but we made it a direct emergency appeal, and we've raised probably about 54,000 from that. Well, we've never done that before. And what we found is that lots of people donated who have not donated before or haven't donated for 5-10 years. We may have looked after their father or their son 15 years ago. And when we come with an ask, it sort of really resonated with them. So that's been quite an amazing response. And I think where we've always been quite slow over the years, and again, this correlation between business and charities, that we've never been as good at actually, you know, people who do an event for us, have we been then good at taking them on a journey, like a client, really? All our donors are clients to a certain extent. Have we been good at taking them on a journey? We're certainly getting better at that. We've always been transparent, but I think as an organisation, being very honest about what we're doing. But again, because it's very virtual and things online, social media, we've got to be even more transparent because we haven't got the opportunity to meet people very often on a one-to-one basis or in a group. So we need to be even more transparent, and that has required more. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, yeah. We've reviewed our calendar. We've had to, and we've accepted, I think, over the last few months and now that this is the new normal for now. This is how it is until the new normal changes again, and it's quite a movable feast, really. We're looking at other ways to engage digitally, and obviously we're being flexible and prepared to change where we need to do. And you know, one thing I have learned also, that if I'm asking people to do things for us, I think it's right that I do things myself as well. So I ran 13 miles around the garden with my 12-year-old son a few months ago. Did a half marathon. We've just sung for Sobell House. We've just launched a little song, "Get By with a little help with my friends" by the Beatles. That's on my LinkedIn page. That's like dedicating that to our nursing staff. But I've pushed our Sam round in a wheelbarrow 26 times around the garden. So we're just trying to do random things. But in order to ask people to do things, I found that I've got to do them myself, really. So that's it. One thing we have also in the last minute, one thing we have learned, I think, is how amazingly we've managed to galvanise as a team, even though we're all working remotely. And that has been quite an interesting exercise, really. We're a much closer team now, I think, even though we don't see each other very often. We don't, apart from on a screen, and occasionally if I go in the office. So that is everything. Is that all right? I can't hear you, Alan. Actually, I think you're on. No, I don't think anyone can hear you.
Okay, I've now
That's better.
turned my microphone on. I was just saying that's really good, Chris, and a lovely message from Chris Badger about how Sobell House.
Can I just say that I am, thanks so much for that, Chris. I am amazed. Well, I'm not amazed now because it happens every day, really. Wherever I go, wherever I speak, if it's a checkout telling someone I work for Sobell House or in this sort of forum, somebody will tell me something like Chris has just shared. So, yeah, so thanks for that. Thanks for saying that, Chris. I think because of what we do, our tentacles touch everywhere by the very nature that we're end-of-life care provider in Oxfordshire. But thanks for listening. Thanks, Jason, as well, and everybody else.
Yeah.
I wish I could remember her name. I can't remember the name of the lady that came round, but she was wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
as for a small group people, we'll probably do more open forum stuff today. Any comments on what Tim had to say? Any thoughts about it? Any lessons we can learn as businesses? Be brave. Yeah, Graham.
Emergency appeal. All right. Sorry. You use the term emergency.
Yeah.
And I just wonder if that's a bit of how that rang through. What in terms of emergency, we see natural disasters and things like that, and lots of organisations are suffering funding challenges. I just wondered whether the term emergency was something that is used within the industry or not.
Well, we've never used it before, Graham.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we actually use an agency to advise us on.
Okay.
So this is new ground for us, and I think as an organisation, we're quite conservative in that sort of thing. So that's a good point. Obviously, an emergency is something you can only use every so often, can't you? Really?
Yeah, it's the enduring nature of. And next year another emergency comes. It's
and thankfully, it's not something we have to use very often.
Yeah.
So we were going to do an appeal anyway. That was sort of the very first time, but I don't know. We were sort of advised in a way to use the word emergency. That's a good point, though. Whether it's there are emergencies and emergencies. We are as a charity, we're quite secure because we have to be secure because our services need to continue through this sort of situation. But we're not secure forever. So I suppose that's why we use the word emergency, really, I suppose.
It was just a point on
No,
that.
it's a fair point. It's a good point because there are different levels of emergency as well. So, yeah.
How much funding do you get from donations from like the furniture and stuff that people leave in their wills? And what sort of percentage of that is the charity's income?
Well, it's about $5.5 million to run the place, and we need to raise around about 2 million. Is that what you mean? I mean, the bulk of our income comes from the fundraising area rather than the shops.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
The shops, because obviously they might have quite a high income, but obviously they've got people working in the shops as well, so they've got to pay a shop manager. So
I was thinking of all the furniture and things really, rather than the stuff in the shops. Is much of a percentage of your shop's turnover from the furniture and stuff that's donated?
Yeah, definitely. The furniture makes, because it's high end, it's high ticket amount. So the figure I'd probably think though, from a fundraising point of view, the net income that our shops contribute is probably around about 250,000 a year. Around about 1.7 needs to come from people sacrificially giving, people running for us, people leaving money in their wills, and people do leave money in their wills for us. And legacy, you mentioned about legacies. Often legacies are quite random, that people leave money to us who've got a very tentative connection. It's not all people who we've been caring for. Some of them can be quite tentative connections. We do get a lot of income from is in memory, and that's more of a regular. Obviously, because of what we do, every month people are giving money in memory of their friends.
Right, very good. Okay, Jason, do you want to share with us how you found lockdown and lessons business might learn? Okay, I'll unmute you there. Okay.
Great, thanks, Alan.
Okay.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you. I work for Innovista. We're a leadership development charity. We identify and equip leaders to transform their communities in hard to reach and unlikely places. So we're in countries all the way from Ireland in the west to countries of Central Asia in the east, places like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Siberia, and Russia. So we like a challenge. And the coronavirus pandemic has certainly provided a challenge for all of us. So I thought what I'd do is just share with you three lessons that I think we are learning, and to an extent those that we're working with are learning, and I think have resonance with running a business. I've got a really straightforward PowerPoint, which I will share for those of you who like PowerPoint.
The group.
There's three things. First, you can all see that.
Yeah.
So the first lesson, I think, is the importance of taking a nap. One of the biggest impacts of this pandemic is the creation of anxiety. Wave after wave of anxiety. We're anxious about our health, or the health of those that we care about. We're of course anxious about the economic impact, the impact on our businesses, the impact on maybe those that we employ, or again on our wider family and friends. If you have children, you might be anxious about their education, their development. You might be wondering if they will ever be able to concentrate well again because they're spending so much time online. You might just be anxious about the uncertainty and the volatility in the world. When will it end? Will it end? Anxiety is in the air that we breathe. And high anxiety, especially when it's prolonged, is just bad for business. And it's bad for business because as business leaders, high anxiety makes it really difficult to think straight and to make good decisions. I'm sure we've all had experiences of just staring at some information that we're trying to make sense of. And because of this a state of stress, we're literally unable to think straight. And when the whole system is anxious, the business system, relationships suffer, communication tends to be poor, and the whole thing can easily fray at the edges. And of course, that just adds to anxiety. And that's why this idea of taking a nap, I think, is so important for us. Nap meaning non-anxious presence. So we have to work really hard, I think, to cultivate being a non-anxious presence for a whole load of reasons. Firstly, because for us, we will make much better decisions if we're not dominated by anxiety. All the research shows that other people trust those who are non-anxious more than those who are anxious. So if you're trying to influence people either inside your business or outside, thinking about clients and prospective clients, all the research says that they are much more likely to trust you and follow you if you are not anxious, or if you are considerably less anxious than the majority of people that are around them. So this idea of taking care of ourselves so that we can be a non-anxious presence is really important. And I've seen it time and time again in the last few months, the power and the influence of leaders who are not dominated by anxiety. It's very striking, and they clearly have far more influence than those who are dominated by anxiety. Couple of sort of practical things to do in terms of cultivating the nap. First thing, I think, is just admitting our anxiety, just naming it and saying that we're anxious. Second, where it's possible, to identify the particular drivers. What are the things that are particularly causing our anxiety? Third, really helpful to bring facts to bear on the feeling of anxiety where we can. I was talking to someone last week who was really anxious about the easing of the lockdown restrictions and didn't want to go outside, wouldn't meet anyone outside at 2 meters because they were so afraid. And I shared with them the findings of one particular piece of research that was done in Japan that says that found that we are 17 times less likely to contract the virus outside compared to inside. And that piece of data shifted their perception, and it reduced their anxiety considerably. So where we can, I think we need to bring data and facts to bear on our feelings. And then, of course, the other thing is just to invest in doing things that help us reduce our own anxiety. So that it varies for person to person, but things like adequate exercise, sleep, maybe prayer, sharing with someone else that you trust so you're not carrying it on your own. But I'm encouraging all the leaders that I'm working with to have a NAP plan that they consistently work, so that when they're in meetings, when they're talking to prospective clients, they are peaceful, calm, and frankly the kind of people that you want to be with and you want to trust. So that's the power of the NAP. Okay, number one. Number two, listening to stakeholders. Our businesses and charities are part of a system that involves lots of other people and lots of other organizations. That might be staff, that might be customers, that might be beneficiaries, suppliers, regulators, on and on. You can build a picture of those that are part of the system that you inhabit, and all of them are impacted in different ways by coronavirus. And I think the charities, the organizations, in our case, the churches and the businesses that are responding best are those who are engaging with and listening to their stakeholders. Because what happens is that grows understanding of the needs of others. It grows loyalty, it grows commitment, and it grows engagement. And businesses that best understand their stakeholders are the ones who are best able to change and innovate in ways that really matter for their stakeholders. Whether that's your paying customers, your clients, your supporters. And to listen to our stakeholders, we need to be willing to ask questions and then stop talking. To listen and then to respond to what we hear. I think the risk is often that we assume we know what people need, and in a time like this, when everything has changed quickly and dramatically, most needs have shifted, and we need to understand what the current needs are so that we can respond accordingly. Over the last month, we've been working with an organisation in an Eastern European country with a team of about 60 staff, and their entire operating model was blown out of the water by coronavirus. They had no activity looking for the next sort of 3 to 4 months. All of their planned activities had to stop. A significant part of their income was tied to that activity, so that disappeared basically overnight, and they had to rethink. And they ran a process of listening to all their stakeholders. And they were a little skeptical at the beginning, but they agreed to give it a go, basically because they were really stuck. And I spoke to the director of this organization last week, who was literally bouncing up and down on his chair with excitement as to what had happened. And he described how listening had helped them understand the needs of their stakeholders, particularly the beneficiaries that they were concerned with, and those that they worked through in ways that they had never understood them before. And as a result, they'd been able to shape a new way of working that met needs really powerfully and critically engage their staff. So this guy says to me, the whole team have gone from feeling stuck and not knowing what to do to being really excited and highly committed, and everyone's getting on with the job, and they'd set some really ambitious new goals, and we're making brilliant progress. So I think the need to listen to stakeholders and then use that information to help us innovate and change is lesson number 2 for us. Last one is, when you don't know the future, pretend that you do. I think one of the challenges, one of the big challenges in all of this is that no one knows what happens next. No one knows when and how economic activity will pick up. No one knows when social distancing will end. No one knows if there's another wave coming, etc., etc. And all these unknowns make planning really difficult because planning is based on assumptions. So what we've found is that while we don't know for sure, we can pretend. So we've created some assumptions that we think are reasonable, and we've planned against them. And what we've done is made our assumptions towards the worst case scenario, because we think if we're planned and prepared as best as we can be for those, if it's a bit better, then it's all upside. So for example, we've planned on assuming a 30% reduction in income. We've planned on social distancing being around for 2 years. And using those assumptions and others, we've rethought what we'll do and how we'll do it. And so we feel more prepared than we would be otherwise. So I'd encourage you to articulate some assumptions that you plan against. They may not be exactly what happens, but because you've planned with some assumptions in mind, you'll be better prepared and better able to shift if you need to. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, that's brilliant, Jason. I did love some of that stuff, actually. Right. Any quick questions? If not, we'll move into breakout groups. I'm thinking on the breakout groups, what we will do is do our 60 seconds. I'm just writing it in a chat box. Then what do you do for a app? Okay, so what's your non-anxiety periods? And how long do you think?
P is for presence, Alan.
Sorry?
P is for presence.
Oh, sorry. Non-anxiety presence. Okay, you'll have to explain that to me because I didn't get that. Okay. And how long do you think social distancing will whoops, can't spell. Last. Okay, there we go. Lovely, in my abbreviated format. Okay, any quick questions? Any thoughts? No. Okay, that was really good, Jason, actually, really so, and Tim as well. Just very interesting to see how people innovated, and I did love that social distancing was going to last for 2 years. I think that's good planning to be that rigorous. Right, let's just stop recording.